full Root of Nightmares raid guide by Fallout Plays. It is a little different from what we usually do. I do run a lot of Destiny. 69 Root of Nightmares clears, nice. So not someone who's a master, so to speak, not someone that the community will look to for like Datto, Aztecross, etc. You know, not someone on that level, but I've definitely taught a few runs, and I'm curious to see if either I learned something new or if there's something that maybe there's a different teaching style on. I'm very interested to see how this is presented.
Here's my full guide on how to beat the Root of Nightmares raid. Why don't we not waste any time and dive right in? Quick note before the first encounter. This was all recorded on contest mode on day 1, so it will be easier for you and your team when contest mode is over.
Okay. Doing Pantheon week 4 minus 20. I mean, I'll equate that to contest mode. Especially because we have Tormentor.
Okay, first encounter.
How do you run this?
The first encounter is a wide open area with kind of a left half of the map and a right half of the map separated by a large structure in the very middle. The goal of the encounter is to activate all the little DNA nodes throughout the entire area one at a time.
Okay.
When players are within the big glowing blue aura of the Traveler Orb plate and they shoot the Traveler Orb itself, they receive a buff called Field of Light. This buff can be refreshed in the same way, again by going back into the glowing aura of any Traveler plate and shooting the Traveler Orb itself. More on that in a minute. The wipe mechanic you have to avoid is called Sweeping Terror. If the timer on that ever goes all the way down to 0, your team is going to die. You can extend the timer by killing Tormentors, which will periodically pop up around the map. Our team had 4 players on both Ad Clear and Tormentor duty, while 2 players focused on running the Field of Light buff from plate to plate.
Why? So I actually see some groups do this. Why though? Especially if you're doing a teaching run. Having 5 ad clear, especially if you're unsure if people are going to have the right weapons. Not everyone has an Apex bait and switch. Not everyone's got Kata bait and switch. Not everyone, you know, yes, some person's gonna be, oh, well, I could use Whisper. And yes, theoretically, you could Whisper. Can you proc that box breathing? Can you remain unflinched? Can you hit your shots? Some people are going to be like, well, I want to use Tractor, and that's fine. No, well, I want to use it. It just depends, right? Whenever you teach a raid, whenever you go into this, you have to look at, you know, okay, what's the skill level? How many people am I actually teaching? Oh, we have 1 person learning. Okay, so pretty standard setup. I mean, I've always ran it duo, or sorry, excuse me, I've always ran it solo. I have tried running it duo. There's a little bit of finagling you and your other runner have to do. And I want to finish this first encounter before I really get into that. But why not just run it solo? We have Eager Edge tech. If you're shot calling and running the raid, as I do a lot, I take all responsibility for the red border, unless they're like well skating or shatter skating and they're way ahead of me and they say, hey, I can take it, right? But they communicate that to me. Shot calling and teaching a raid, I take the red border. I take initiative in the encounters. I don't just do ad clear. In fact, I fall asleep on ad clear. I will run every one of this solo. Yes, he is right in the orb section. I hope he mentions that there are 4 sections of these, 4 sections of the orbs you have to link, and I'm very curious if he's going to talk about breaking the line.
The encounter starts. Barrier champions and 2 orange bar scions with a protective bubble will spawn in. The scions need to be killed immediately because killing them is what spawns in the tormentors, which again you need to kill to avoid the wipe mechanic. For the 2 runners on your team, the initial Traveler Orb plate will visually direct you to which DNA node you need to go to next.
By the dome.
Just follow the direction of the thin beam of light shooting out of the Traveler Orb. You can also tell which plate you need to go to next because it no longer looks like a DNA strand, but rather it'll look like this, a small darkish orb. When you've found the small darkish orb plate where you need to go to next, go right up to it, again with the Field of Light buff, and shoot it to activate. That will consume your Field of Light buff, but will progress the encounter. The runner will now have to go back to a Traveler Orb plate with a glowing blue aura and reactivate it to reacquire their Field of Light buff. TLDR, the runners are grabbing the Field of Light buff from the blue Traveler plate, taking it to the small black orb plate, shooting the small black orb and activating it, then backpedaling to reacquire the Field of Light buff from any glowing Traveler plate.
Yes, that works for solo. However, duo is a little bit of a different strat. That explanation works perfectly fine for solo, in my opinion. It gets you there. But when you're running duo, there's a little more nuance to that.
While the ad clear people are shredding both Cabal, Champions, the Scions, and the Tormentors.
He also doesn't mention the anti-barrier.
Keep doing this until you see the message, his hatred halts. Think of that as kind of like a tiny little breather for your team. Your team will then move to a new blue glowing initial Traveler Orb plate, and you will keep doing the same thing that you've been doing. Rinse and repeat until the encounter is over. Check the pinned comment. I'll have a link to the moment in the day 1 stream when we beat the first encounter. encounter if you would like to see a full run.
No, okay, so no mention of how Duo Strat works and Field of Light breaking the chain. No mention of Tormentor. You can save the Tormentor till the next phase if you're fast enough. I'm pretty sure people were doing this day one, and even then, right? Like, this was a year ago. I don't know if this was done on a day one. I don't know if this was done after day one. I don't know if there were other runs in this. So the big one that has to get mentioned is Disruption, and that is the unfortunate part about running Duo, especially if you're not communicating with your fellow running partner. If I have a buff, right, and say someone in chat, we're going to pull someone random, right? Gravity Gaming, we're going to pull you for a second. So if I'm running the buff, right, and I'm in the little dome, I hit the nut, and I move forward, and somebody else, say Gravity, comes in, maybe he is miscommunication, maybe thinks, oh, well, I'll just get it, right, or hits it accidentally with Grenade, right? Just unfortunate series of events. And he gets the buff, that will break my line. I will see the lines between them, but I will not see the end node. 2, I want to be able to dunk the end node. And 3, the real only way to fix that, through my testing, has been to not only let your buff of light expire, but then you have to wait a few additional seconds, like 2 or 3 additional seconds, for the orb to fully come back, the dome to come back, and then you hit it, and then you can start running again. Which is why I say that this is good for a solo run, but when you do Duo, the way that Duos work, and even then, if this being a day one, I'm a little confused why they didn't mention the solo strat, because, say, me in Gravity Gaming in chat, right? Say we're running. I hit the orb, I will go to my first node. As soon as I dunk my first node, your second runner is already waiting in the initial bubble. They hit it, and then they go. And while they're going out, I'm coming back into the initial node, right? Or I'm finding the node with the dome over it, right? And so you have this hit, extend, dunk, hit, extend, and while your second player is extending, you're retracting in, right? And then rinse, repeat, right? The first runner will hit the thing again, and then they'll extend while the second runner retracts into first plate. So even though this is done on day one, I'm a little concerned that wasn't mentioned, as that will trip up a lot of fire teams. I know myself, when someone's like, hey, let's run this Duo, and I had to try, it took me a couple tries to get this down. I do think that is a glaring omission. There is also no mention of the barrier champions, as somebody that has done numerous Road to Nightmares runs, someone who's done a master, someone who has done, negative 5, 10, 15, 20 in Pantheon for planets alone. There's champions, right? There are champions in this encounter. I can, for a fact, explain the anti-barrier. So, yeah, leapfrog, think like Eater Worlds to a degree. So, yes, you have those 2 lanes, and he mentions the Tormentor spawn. The Tormentor is tied inherently to the Scions that you see in Leviathan, Scions that you see in Season of the Haunted, right? You have to get in the bubble, you have to melee them, Vox Obscura even, melee them, and then they will spawn the Tormentor. Now, there's a couple interactions that stem from this. One, you can have a situation where you kill the Tormentor and 0 Scions will spawn. It's because I think it's below 35 seconds is when the Scions will actually spawn. If you say kill a Tormentor and you have a minute 12 or like 58 seconds, the Scions will not spawn. And a lot of fire teams will get confused, especially when you start saving Tormentors, which is my second point, where it's like, oh God, I'm not sure what's going on here. I don't see my Scions, right? And it's just like, they'll be there. I promise you they'll be there. We're at 58 seconds. We're at a minute. They're not going to spawn quite yet. 40 seconds, 35 seconds, start looking around. There is that visual cue. You hear of them coming into existence, right? You can hear it. Much like once you kill both Scions, there is a visual cue, audio cue. There's an audio cue for a Tormentor and the anti-barrier spawning. The anti-barrier emission is a little strange to me because that's huge to know going into the encounter and helps your team also make those callouts. So if you're, say, on left side, you see an anti-barrier spawn in, yes, the Tormentor must be right side, and vice versa. You see the Tormentor on left, clearly it's on left, there's going to be an anti-barrier on right, someone's got to deal with it, or you save it and you deal with it. Leading into my second point, and I'm 90% sure that people, especially because we had Eager Edge tech, are going to be able to run this day one and save the Tormentor. The only thing that adds time is that the Tormentor dies. So this leads you into the situation in which if you are solo running, which I do a lot, and I do the first entire section, I do the first run, and sometimes even the second, depending how fast I am, depending on the RNG for the node, that I can finish it, and I'll tell them to save that Tormentor. The timer will stop between phases, right? So from line 1 going into line 2 to line 3 to line 4, etc. Once you move up and the timer starts again, you kill that Tormentor, you will get that time. So you can save those between phases. So I'm a little kind of shocked that some of this information is missing. But, I mean, I can kind of hand wave it because if this was really done using only day one, maybe this tech hadn't been established. But considering, you know, the number of prominent Destiny 2 people, such as, you know, Clan Elysium, Salt, Aztecross, Datto, right? It would be very surprising if this tech wasn't known in day one. And we even had personalities like Moist Critical just saying, yeah, I mean, this is easy. This raid was easy. So I had no doubt they were using tech like this.
All right, second encounter. On the way to the second encounter, you'll come across these little jumper plates,
Couches.
which will launch your Guardian if you stand in front of them.
We also
and
missed
shoot the
secret
little
chest, but this
floating
is day
button.
one.
You're going to use these in Encounter 2, so get a feel for them now. Encounter 2 has similar mechanics of Encounter 1. You'll be grabbing a buff like before and using that buff to activate those small darkish orbs just like before. However, unlike before, there are now two buffs, the light one called Field of Light and a dark one called Flux of Darkness. You still get the Field of Light buff from activating the glowing blue Aura Traveler plate, but you get the Flux of Darkness power by activating the glowing orange Aura plate. The Encounter 2 room is split into a left and right side, separated by a huge gap where you can and will fall to your death if you jump off. Split your team up into two groups, 3 on the left and 3 on the right. We had 2 people on each side function as purely ad clear, and 1 person on each side were the runners, aka people who grabbed the either light or dark buff and used that buff to activate the small black orbs. Here's
one strat that I hear is actually, I guess, meta for this, and this is well after day one. This is well after we have, you know, light levels on this raid, is people, I guess, will use 2 runners and 1 ad clear. And I mean, I've had 4 people on a side and them struggle, where me and, you know, someone on my mod team, you know, we've been running a single side by ourselves. I'm ad clearing everything, you know, using an Apex BNS, because you don't really need to damage this encounter. Apex BNS on the barrier champion. Cool, barrier champion's out. And, you know, it's possible to do a side. I mean, it's not that out there, but people have been using the same laddering strat we were mentioning. In this encounter, you have to, and he'll explain, you have to take the initial buff, you must go across, you must come back, you must go forward, and then you go back, and then you go, like, you know, top caddy corner to you. So if you're on light side, you'll go top left. If you're on dark side, you go top right, right? And then you'll kind of start from that second node, because there's 6 nodes in the encounter, 3 on left, 3 on right for each side, and they're also shifted on floors. I don't think he'll mention that, but I will make reference to the placement of them later.
where it gets tricky. The runner's path is not a straight line. While the ad clear folks will pretty much stay planted and gun down Cabal the entire time, the runners will very often need to swap sides of the map to reach their next small black orb. In order to do that, like I mentioned, stand in front of the jumper plate, shoot the little floating button, and get launched to the other side. This is a very difficult encounter to fully describe. Look right here, right off the bat, after I activate the Flux of Darkness power on the left, I immediately need to launch myself across the map because my very first small black orb that I need to activate is on the other side. You can tell that black orb needs the Flux of Darkness buff specifically because it has a thin orange line connecting to it. Remember, blue is Field of Light and orange is Flux of Darkness. Also, remember that again, every time you take either the light or dark buff and use it to activate a small black orb, you progress the encounter, but you also lose your buff, just like Encounter 1. The runners will then need to reacquire the Field of Light or Flux of Darkness buff. Now, I'm sure that some teams did this with one runner doing only the darkness buff and one runner doing only the light buff. Yeah. However, the runners on our team often went back and forth between the buffs to cut.
I've never understood this crisscross strat. I think that it's challenge. I personally don't do it, especially in teaching runs. I will just say, you know, and I usually run these encounters, right? I'm shot calling. Generally, I will just run this. Just keep it the same color, right? Stay on your dark nodes. Stay on your light nodes. We'll clear this encounter. We'll clear all 3 floors. Be done with it, right? So this is something that does exist, and a lot of day one teams I hear did use this, and a lot of early teams did use this crisscross strat. Me personally, I never really found value in it, and I mean, it's to each their own, right? If you prefer the crisscross strat, cool. If you don't prefer the crisscross strat, I mean, you know, same boat as me. It's different things for different people, but eventually you will reach the same conclusion. I think that maintaining the same color has a lower skill ceiling, though.
down on how often we wanted to
skill floor,
launch ourselves across the map, because that mechanic kind of sucks. For example, at the very beginning of Encounter 2, watch, I start by activating the dark buff on the left side of the map, launch myself over to the right side, and activate my small black orb. Now, I could have gone straight orange the whole way through, launched back to my original side to reacquire another dark buff, but why not cut down on overall travel time? I stayed on the right side of the map and
why not cut down on overall travel time? It depends on your team, if I'm being completely honest. The fact of the matter is that there are people that are less skilled at this game, and that's not a jab. Yes, if you're good enough, absolutely. Feel free to cut down on travel time. Feel free to do whatever you need to finish the encounter. However, when you're teaching people and you're not sure on, on skill floors, you're not sure on skill ceilings, you're just unsure, technically the way I view it is your single nodes are going to be the safer, more consistent option. If your team knows what they're doing, absolutely run crisscross. It is going to be the less consistent option, but with a potentially faster and higher payout.
Swapped to the light buff instead because I was already there, while the other runner stayed on the left side because he was already there and he swapped to the dark buff. If that sounds confusing to you, you can have one runner always do dark and one runner always do light the whole way through, but you're going to be launching back and forth way more frequently. Also, Ad Clear team, pay attention to your runners. When they're about to reacquire their buffs, either light or dark, group up with them immediately. Remember that anyone can get the light or dark buff if they are in the glowing aura when the Traveler or dark orange symbol is shot. And Ad Clear players are going to need that buff, not for running or activating anything, but there are certain Cabal that can only be damaged by players with either the light or dark buff.
They have the
aura. To recap, runners acquire the buff, either light or dark, then head to the small black orb they're being directed to. Dark runners look for orange, light runners look for blue. It could be on your side or it could be on the opposite side. Activate the small black orb, then go back and reacquire your buff. Rinse and repeat, launching across the divide if need be. Ad Clear folk, watch your runners and join them when they reapply their buff, light or dark, to make sure you get the buff that also helps you kill the immune Cabal. And runners, try to always reacquire the buff at the same time with a 3, 2, 1 countdown so you're always on the same page. Makes things much easier. Each time you finish a floor by getting all the way to the end of the hallway and killing the Cabal that spawn there, you will then upgrade by launching upwards to the next floor. There are 3 floors in total. Oh, and note there will be barrier champions at the end of each floor. Be sure you are prepared for that. I strongly recommend that you go down to the pinned comment and watch the second link, which has our first clear of the second encounter, as again, I know this can all sound very confusing. Good luck. Try to move quick. You can use an Eager Edge sword if you want. Remember, there is no boss in Encounter 2, so anything you want to do to move quicker, be my guest.
Did we not mention Ascent blocked by interlopers? That's the event flag for we're done with the floor. We need to Ad Clear, and then anyone can hit the buff. Okay, let's explain. Let's take a minute to explain Cision. Okay, I actually have this pinned in my Discord server. Actually, I have it pinned in D2 chat. So Cision, yes, he is mostly right. He gets there. He does explain the crisscrossy, which I personally don't do. So this is the encounter. You're going to have your first floor, second floor, third floor, obviously. We're going to go, for all intents and purposes, to the first floor on the left. You can see in the middle of the gap, you have the 2 circles with the triangles in it, right? The right side is going to be light. The left side is going to be dark. Note how light and dark, once you move, so there's 2 floors on the first floor. There's 2 sides, right? There's right half and then there's left half, right? On right half, note that the light nodes, you can't really see my mouse right now, but the start, 2, and 4 are towards the middle, towards the chasm. And dark, 1, 3, 5 are towards the wall. On the left side, it's kind of shifted, if that makes sense, where they're in the same spots. You have 1, 3, 5 on light at the wall. You have start 2, 4 at the gap. Once you up to floor 2, this does flip, and floor 3, this does flop back to normal. But when I tell people where to look for your nodes specifically, yes, you can look for the little line thingy, but 1, either have a map like this open, or 2, just, understand that if you are on first floor, your light on your starting side will always be towards the center of the gap, right? Your lights will be near the wall once you cross over. Floor 2, this swaps, where instead of being on this left side, right, this is now towards the gap. On the right side, this is now towards the wall, flopping back to floor 3. Once you see it, it makes a lot more sense. The other big criticism I have with this is the lack of interlopers, and everyone saw this. Day one, everyone can see it is a buff that does show up. I do know that the Bungie buff bar, as of right now, you know, going into final shape, just before final shape, yeah, it kind of sucks. I don't have that feedback that I need from it, right? However, once both sides have completed, right? Once one side completes, there will be a flash. The other side completes, there will be a flash. Your ascent is blocked by interlopers. You have cleared the floor. You must add clear at that point in time. At that point, your runners can hit the same buff. You can hit the buff. Anyone can hit that buff to add clear. And I have to stress this to so many teams. And I think I've honestly found one of the issues. So part of it is in my teaching, right? It's hard in teaching these runs. You know, I run into people that will sometimes do odd things, or they say, well, I've always done it this way. Why is that, right? Why would they do it that way? How would they do it that way? Where would they get this information? And so hence why I want to look at videos like this to kind of critique, see if I can learn something new, or if it's completely different, or if it's missing information. So in this case, it was missing the ascent block by interlopers. Once you see that buff, it's weapons free on that nut. You can hit that, get the buff, just take care of your ads as fast as possible. The amount of groups, the amount of people that I've taught that don't know that you can do that is actually quite staggering. I'm going to have people that are like, well, my team's always done it. Well, if you're in a static, you technically play by different rules, right? It's why Clan Elysium plays by different rules than literally the rest of the game, because they are a clan. They are a static, are they not? Me going into Bungie LFG, trying to week 4 Pantheon Planets LFG has a harder time doing that. And then I'm going to have many people at this point in time, well, you don't have Godslayer, you know, what can you say on the game? You got me. I don't want to spend another 50 hours in Planets in LFG. So I guess I'll just eat that L. I guess I'll eat the L for not knowing how to play the game, even though I got Wrathbearer. I had to cheese it, but I do have Wrathbearer. So just number of things that I think the video was mostly on point with that. And I think that there was incomplete information. Once again, I think part of that is going to be the day one mindset. And we've refined tactics over time, but I don't really think there was a reason to exclude blocked by interlopers, in my opinion.
All right, next I guess is Encounter 2.5. Not really an encounter, but it's kind of a jumping puzzle on the way to Encounter 3 in a huge wide open area. Out here, there are both light plates and dark plates, just like before. Here's the only thing that's different. Every now and then, a huge orange wave of light will wash over the entire area. The moment that orange wave touches your body, you will die. However, you can shield yourself from that orange death wave in the following way. First, go into a glowing blue light plate and shoot it to acquire the light buff, just like in Encounters 1 and 2. But
yeah, the lack of Eager Edge here is actually kind of astonishing, because a lot of people use Eager Edge. Is this the encounter that the Almost Day 1 team did? The famous I'm just going to go to orbit and not actually play the game and come back at planets. Is that what happened?
And take the Field of Light buff and bring it to an orange dark plate and shoot the orange nut to get the Darkness's Refuge buff. If you have Darkness's Refuge active when the big orange wave of light touches your body, you will live. Again, take the light buff to a dark plate and activate that dark plate to get a buff that will protect you against the big orange wipe mechanic. Keep following the path in the area until you reach Encounter 3, protecting yourself from the wipe mechanic as you go.
I know somebody explained this in the really most just kind of the crappiest way, no pun intended, possible. You take the TP to wipe the crap, right? In the most just awful way I could explain it. It's not wrong. You take the light buff, you charge the dark buff with it. The dark buff gives you Darkness's Refuge, and if you look at the ground, the plate will glow. As long as that plate is glowing after you hit it, that will give you Darkness's Refuge. So if Nezarec is about to burst, he's about to bust, right? You can kind of plan ahead for that, or kind of hunker down if you need to. So just some movement tech for some people. Red border, second red border was in a little hut off to the left. Usually I get it, usually the raid shot caller or a designated person will take care of that. So unless you're teaching, unless you're shot calling the raid, you know, or somebody assigns it to you specifically, don't really worry about that. There is a point halfway through the jump puzzle where you do encounter a door. I'm a little surprised because I know people do well skate, people do shatter skate, and I know we had that tech during day one. So if people go towards the top, well, I guess maybe we didn't know the map at that point in time, especially for your actual first competition clear, but the subsequent clears, right? People who know the map and can watch videos, you can well skate and skate up to the top. but your team will be stuck towards a door at the halfway point in which your team must come down. If you're also just a Chad, you can kind of Chad route it. You can kind of jump around come back from the door to the dark node, jump around to the left, hit the nut, and then you can hop up and avoid the door entirely. So, I mean, it's not a hard encounter. It's really not. For your average person just trying to make their way through, this is perfectly fine. This will absolutely suffice. If you're looking at it from an experienced or veteran perspective, looking at it from a speedrunner perspective, you can take some contention or some issue, but I don't think that's necessarily fair to what this video is trying to achieve. Oh, baby.
All right, encounter 3, the planet room. The goal of this encounter is to move the planets around in a certain configuration. When the planets are in the correct configuration, you may then damage the boss on one of 3 plates near the middle of the room, moving from one plate to another, one at a time. When damage phase is over, you will repeat, once again, moving the planets into the correct configuration. Here's a beautiful layout of the room. Thank you, Cosmic.
I'm sorry, what? Now I get why people call this wrong. Now this makes a lot more sense, actually. I'm going to take some issue with this. So, I'm just going to go pull up my server map for Macrocosm. So, the way that I will always call this, and I actually have amended my callouts to be more forgiving of this. So, your room is divided into the left side and the right side, which he will explain. Left is going to be light, right is going to be dark. You have 4 plates, right? Generally, the way you want to run this and the way that I usually teach this is you will have 2 ad clear and you'll have 4 plate runners. Me personally, if I'm feeling spicy that day, if I feel, 4 people can actually ad clear and my other runner wants to do it, I'll absolutely do it. And we'll explain how with the nut in a minute. Your plates, and we'll just use right. We'll use dark side as the kind of, this is how this works. 1, 2, 3. As you can see them on the right, on the bottom right plate. 1 will be the quote-unquote middle. 2 will be the quote-unquote wall. 3 will be the quote-unquote top. 4 will be the quote-unquote middle. 5 will be the quote-unquote wall. 6 will be the quote-unquote top. They are equilateral triangles, and each point has a planet. Now, how I explain this to people is when you swap over to the other side, think it's mirrored. And this is why I call it the way that I do. So, if you are on light side, right, using the same exact calls, 1, the middle, 2, the wall, 3, the top. Oh my God, it's almost like we can fix that with just calls. And there's what's why I've omitted my calls to that. So regardless if you're on L2 or R2, right? Hey, Kip, I got L5. You're going to the wall. Cool. Thank you. You're going 4. You're going to the middle, right? And I think that's one of those things that I didn't learn from anybody. Nobody told me to call it that way. This is me shot calling the raid for a long enough period of time and having to Sherpa and teach enough people that I end up just modifying my calls to fit certain situations. It's like when we go into Oryx, how many people are going to argue about what the front versus back of the room is? Okay. Shot calling the raid. Okay, so this is going to be the front of the room. It's not really going to matter, but the front of the room is the banner. If you have an issue, that's fine. This raid specifically, we're doing it this way. Cool? Everybody cool? Awesome. And like 99.9% of times, it's fine. You get the one person that tries to joke, right? But I mean, like, other than that, nobody really has an issue with that. You're not telling them that their calls are garbage. You're not telling them that they're wrong. It's like, look, for this, we're going to run it this way. If you have an issue, that's fine. You're more than welcome to find another group. But it doesn't even matter, right? For Oryx, you're going L1, R1, which is generally in front of the banner. L2, R2, which is towards where Oryx spawns, right? Cool, I've eliminated front and back of the room from this equation. Everyone is now on the same page. So that's how I end up teaching it. If you're looking at, so the way that the encounter will go, and he will explain this, there will be 1 mismatched planet. So we will have 2 dark and 1 light on R1. And say for all intents and purposes, the dark planets are 3 and 2, so that means 1, the middle on R1 is going to be the light planet. Your L1, your light side, is going to call, hey, I have 3, the top, as a dark. You swap them. You pick up your buff on each of them. You cross over in the middle, right? Some people will planet hop on the top plates. You can use the backslash if you're a warlock or a very experienced hunter. And then you dunk them. And then once everyone has dunked, after enough time passes or you hit the nut, which is, once again, a strat for duo, that will advance the cycle forward. You'll get a buff called, if you know you did it right, called the planets have indexed themselves. And in indexing themselves, that means that you will go through another wave of this, you will dunk in the center, and then you'll be able to do damage. Now, how you duo this, you take plates, unless you're really skilled, and I've seen someone actually solo this, but they were using well skating strats, which I'm not consistent enough at. So when you... The way that the encounter works is it functions on a series of event flags. Well, naturally, you're going to be knocking out those phalanxes up top. Adcler's going to be knocking them out. You will have some Centurions with solar shields that spawn in the back. Once you kill the phalanxes, you will have Scions spawn from around the edges. This is actually the same event flag that will spawn the Flamer if you've done Pantheon. Once Adclair or plates helping kill the Centurion, there will be a Colossus that spawns on each plate. If you're doing Master, it will be an anti-bearer. Keep that in mind. So, once you kill a Colossus, it is either technically a light or a dark Colossus, as the room is divided into light and dark. If you kill a Colossus on left side, you will be able to see the L2 plate and L1 plate's planets. If you kill the Colossus on the right side on the dark side, right, you'll be able to see all of the dark ones. You'll see R2 and R1. And so when you're doing this duo, what you can do is, you know, start from, say, L1, R1, you and your PAG partner, you end up killing the Colossuses, you take your buffs, you swap it, you dunk, make sure the Colossuses are dead unless your Adclear's already taken care of them. Then you will hit the nut in the center. I've mentioned this 3 times already. What is that nut in the center? What does it actually do? Why does my raid group not want to touch that? Hitting that nut will advance the cycle forward 1. What the nut will do is it will stop the current planetary shift, right? Being able to move planets from one plate to the other. It will stop that. It will begin to move the planets around the arena, and it will advance that cycle 1 forward. Generally, I tell people, unless they know what they're doing specifically, or I tell them specifically, don't touch that nut. Don't even look at it. Don't even think about it. Do not touch that nut, because you will mess up an index if you don't know what you're doing. So for all intents and purposes, anyone shot calling the raid, anyone more experienced at the raid, just leave that nut to them unless they call you specifically to hit that nut. Be aware it's there. Most teams don't even use it because, you know, they'll take that whole time, they'll index it, they'll flop over, they'll index, and then move directly into the phase where they need to actually dunk in the middle to do damage. So I do take issue with those callouts. This is something that I look at and I immediately go, this is a static. This is a statics call. I would never tell somebody to do this. I understand what they're doing here. I understand why. And I understand if I was to take somebody into a raid and they said, well, these are the calls that they used, I understand why it's used. It's to make it more uniform. It's to make it so that way you have the same image on the left side and the right side. I understand where it's coming from. However, I think as not only tech has evolved, and I know that map came out fairly early. I don't know if day 1 early, but it came out fairly early. It's much easier in my experience to just explain that the plates on one side are the mirror of the other, and hence why I specifically say 1 middle, 2 wall, 3 top, right? We can look at that, we can understand that. 4 middle, 5 wall, 6 top. Regardless of what side you look at, you understand what's being called. And that, I think, is how you clear up a lot of misconceptions and confusion.
Irony. Don't get confused by the numbers just yet. Just take note of the following. The left side of the room is the light side, the right side of the room is the dark side, and there are 4 large triangles in the room. If you look around the room physically, you'll see that there are 3...
If you see in the middle how on the top there's Io, on the left there's a light planet, on the right there's a dark planet, that directly tells you left will be light, dark will be right.
Planets above each corner of all
reminder.
4 triangles. There are also 3 more planets in the dead center of the room, more on those later. We divided our team into 2 jobs, Adclear, of which there will be 2 of you, 1 on the left and 1 on the right, and the runners. There will be 4 runners, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. Each runner pick one of the 4 triangles and make that your starting position. Begin the encounter by shooting any of the Cabal, and more Cabal will begin spawning into the room. Killing all 4 orange bar Centurions will spawn 4 beefy yellow bar terrestrial lieutenants, 1 on each triangle. Runners, your goal is to kill the 1 lieutenant who has spawned onto your triangle. You have to be the one to finish off this lieutenant, because whoever gets the killing blow automatically gets the planetary insight buff.
This is actually important because if, say, your Adclear pops over and pops your Colossus, they can and will yoink that buff from you. And if they don't know what they're doing, especially, it's like, well, what's the planet? And you will hear nobody calling that out because they don't know. They just don't know. Suddenly the planets may have shifted color, but they're too busy focused on ad clear. So generally, don't have people except you on that plate shoot the Colossus. If ad clear hits it, it's going to be a bad time. Also, there's the unfortunate situation where a Colossus will just fall off, and more often than not, in my experience, it's actually just eaten the buff because it died due to fall damage and you didn't actually finish it off. It will eat, it just won't actually give you the buff. So note that they can fall off the plates. I'm not saying you have to tether them. I'm not saying you have to vortex grenade them. Just finish them off pretty quickly and try not to make them fall off the edge.
When you have the planetary insight buff, you will notice that the planets hovering above your triangle will now be glowing, either light or dark. Remember the map of the room, how left is light side and right is dark? You want to look above your triangle for the planet, light or dark, which is on the wrong side, of which there will only be one per triangle.
Actually, someone that is going to... This is actually a perfect description of how the planets will look. When you're doing the challenge, which is the exact opposite of this, you are leaving the odd one out and you're shifting the 2 right ones to the other side, right? So you're crossing 2 over instead of 1. You will use the nut in the center to save time because it is so tight, especially on Master.
Example, my triangle was on the left side of the room, aka the light side. So when I got the planetary insight buff, I looked for a dark planet, which belongs on the other side of the room. When you've located the oddball out planet, go directly under it and pick up the planetary attunement power. Now your job is to switch sides with the other runner across the room from you.
You see how now you will have all dark on the dark side and all light on the light side, right? You see how that works?
You're each bringing the planet that is out of place to the correct side of the room and dunking it into the spot where it should be. You have to dunk it into the exact correct spot though, so make sure you and your runner partner tell each other which spot on the triangle that is. Referring back to our diagram of the room, we used numbers. Each number corresponds to a spot on the triangle. So
this reads to me like Oryx Pizza call out, or when I say Walmart Target when I do Vault of Glass. If you know, you know. Right. This reads to me like a clan specific, static specific call out. The generalized ones are going to be the mirror.
For example, let's just say I took the buff from number 1 on the left triangle and then brought it over to spot number 2 on the right triangle. It won't always be 1 to 1 or 2 to 2 or 3 to 3.
No,
just make sure you and your runner partner, who again should be the runner on the opposite side of the room as you, are communicating on which spot on the triangle you need to dunk into. The planets will then move themselves at the end of the planetary shift timer.
If you also are on PC and you're having issues with mic noise and like comms chatter, use chat. So, like, have your L1, R1 plate, just have them type, like, L1, R2 in chat, right? How many people, when they're reading in Vault in Last Wish, right? How they'll type in, like, pen number, ant number, etc., right? Same thing. You do have a chat bar. I know if you're on PS4, I know if you're on Xbox, I know when Stadia was a thing, right? You don't necessarily have that ability to do that, right? But if you're on PC, especially if you're shot calling a raid, there is nothing stopping me from being on ad clear, especially if I have Sunbracer tech going. Well, Sunbracer is before Final Shape Nerf, right? And say somebody is like, you know, oh, I have L2, L5, right? I can hit enter, L2, L5, put it in chat. Everybody knows what's going on, right? You could do that, or you could have a dedicated ad clear. Definitely do that. It does put certain stressors on other people. It's like when you have someone in Vaulted Glass take on 3 to 7 oracles at once. There's a spot where you can hit all 7. Yes, I usually take 2 to 3 just because I fall asleep during that encounter anyways. I've also seen many of Vaulted Glass which people cannot count to 7. That is actually the encounter I will run people through if I'm trying to test their communication skills, how they can take information but also communicate it back. That one, oracles, stress-free. Let's do it. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like, this is one of those encounters that you can utilize that chat bar to the fullest extent, and you can even clear up some comp space doing that. Much like when you are in Vow Encounter 1 Pillars, right? And you say it's like Darkness, Gift, and once you get to Gift, it's like Worm, right? So your runners will call out Darkness, Gift, you go into Gift, or so I guess technically it's Pyramid, because it's Pyramid Traveler. So Pyramid, Gift, Darkness, the Darkness Scorn ends up dropping a symbol. Say it's Worm. You type in Worm in the chat, right? Same exact thing. It doesn't have to be callouts. It doesn't have to be Vow callouts. It doesn't have to be Last Wish Vault reading. Use that chat box. I implore you.
which is on your HUD. Okay, after you've done that, kill more Cabal until 4 more lieutenants spawn back into the room. Kill the lieutenants again, 1 for each runner, to reacquire the planetary insight buff. Now, your focus is on the 3 remaining planets hovering in the dead center of the room. With the planetary insight buff, you will notice that the 3 planets in the middle of the room are glowing either dark or light.
So in this case, it will be 2 light, 1 dark. What you're going to do is your 2 on your light side plates on the left side of the room, they will take, once they kill their Colossus, when they can see the planets in the middle, you have to make sure both Colossuses are down because it will prevent people from picking it up. I'm pretty sure he's not going to mention it. Ad clear, make sure the Centurions in the center are dead. If they are not dead, it will prevent people from picking it up, and that has caused a lot of confusion and stress in groups I've ran. So, just pointing that out, make sure the Centurions are dead. If you can't pick it up, check the Centurions are up. In any event. So you'll take 1 planet from each, right? So say L2 takes their 1, L1 takes their, or L2 takes their 4, L1 takes their wall, their 2, right? And they bring them over to the center to charge left plate and middle plate in center. If you double dunk on the plate, say for example, hey, I got middle, right? Oh, and maybe it was a missed call. Maybe they didn't actually get middle. They decided they were going to go left. And then the second person dunks on middle as well. It will undo that buff. So make sure if, like what I'm doing, right? What I do in my raids, right? Hey, I got light left. Cool. Kip has light left. He knows what he's doing. He will have that. I trust that he will have that. And then I dunk light left, and then we have dunk light middle. And then in that case, we'll have somebody from the dark side from right side end up taking it over into the right dark, dunk it, and then that will cause damage phase. There, yes, will be a single plate that will not be used. So in this case, we will have R2 or R1, one of the dark plates that, and it doesn't even have to be the plate because you can actually take planets from each of them. From one of them, I think you can take 2 from like R2, for example. There will be planets that are unused, and that is completely fine. At that point, start shifting to ad clear, especially in Pantheon where you're dealing with tormentors and stuff. That's how you get your shot caller up. That's how you deal with scions around the edge of the room. We're not going to get into Pantheon stuff because it's a tormentor. There's flamers and fire tornadoes that spawn in. That's a whole different game that I'm not going to get into. However, just if you are on that odd plate, do your team a favor and start helping on ad clear for the phase. Proc your verities, proc anything you're going to need.
Will now need to go to any triangle, light or dark, pick up that light or dark buff, then bring that power under the matching glowing planet in the middle and dunk it right into the plate. There are 4 runners and only 3 middle plates.
See, he's hitting the nut,
so 1 runner can focus on.
He's not explaining the nut though. Like he's hitting the nut to advance the phase.
For now, when the powers have been dunked into the correct plates in the middle of the room, the planets in the middle of the room will all begin glowing, and you can now shoot the floating little button thingy hovering in the middle of the room. Now it is damage time. Look at the boss. Whatever color his shield is, that matches the plate you need to go to and stand on in order to damage him. For example, if his shield is light, go stand on the glowing light plate and damage until you can't anymore.
Then you must do the opposite.
If his shield is orange, go stand on a glowing orange plate and damage until you can't anymore. 3 damage phases, 1 per plate, until all the plates are no longer glowing, and that is 1 entire cycle. Rinse and repeat. When you get the boss weak enough, there will be a final stand mode. Just keep damaging him and hit him with everything you have. I know that probably sounds really confusing. So again, link in the pinned comment of our first day 1 completion of Encounter 3 if you want to see how it works in action. On the way to Encounter 4...
So you do opposite to opposite. So if you start, say the call in that case, in that exact thing, is middle, right, left. You will go middle, which is going to be the light. You will go dark, which is going to be on the right, and then you will finish with light, which is on the left. Alternatively, you could go left, right, middle. You could do something like that. General groups will start in the middle. For Pantheon and stuff, well strat was where you run over the plate, you drop well in the middle, and then you start your damage phase. There's, I guess, 2. I think speedruns found out there's like 2 soft damage gates. One is when the plate is initially stepped on. The second DPS gate is going to be when the first hit hits them. Arc Souls, I very much discouraged there because Arc Souls will hit the boss unless you're damage phase. Things like Gathering Storm, awesome idea in concept. However, keep in mind with Gathering Storm, because of the duration of it, what's going to happen is you will step on your plate, you will hit him with the Gathering Storm, and once he becomes immune, the moment you step on the second plate, he will start taking damage from your Gathering Storm again. Therefore, before everyone's in position, he's already taking damage, lessening your damage gate, right? Your damage phase. These are important things to know. I do believe he does have resistance to Golden Gun, which is important to note. I'm not saying there's a meta thing to run here, but things like Dragon's Breath, Gathering Storm, any DOT like that, Pyrogale, make sure you're watching that, or make sure your team is comfortable with you running that. Rockets generally are the strat for him. I know in Pantheon people were using heavy GLs, things like Cry Mutiny, things like Cataphract, which I didn't have because I don't really run Trials at all. I'm awful at Trials. So just things to consider going into the... Like his name is Kipper. What a Chad.
There's another mini jumping puzzle, I guess if you want to call it that. Similar mechanics as before. Both light and dark plates get their power and bring it to the small black orbs to activate them. Yeah. Nothing out of the ordinary here. Very short, not even really an encounter. More of a stepping stone to the final encounter.
Which red border is below Nezarec to the right?
All right, final encounter. Your goal is to kill Nezarec. Here's a quick diagram of the room. Again, thank you, Cosmic Irony. Don't get super hung up on...
That is technically incorrect. Unless day one was very specifically... If day one was very specifically set orbs, I know what he's trying to achieve with this chart. I know what he's trying to do. But your starting plate, your one will always be static on both sides. Why it says 2/3 means either of those plates could be the second one. So you go from start to first, and then it can either be directly up from you or directly to your right. And then you'll have to get the buff again. You'll have to finish off the other one, right? 4 to 5, that's variable as well. That's why it says 4/5. It can be either of those. So it's the same thing like Encounter 1, Encounter 2. Planets is actually the most different of any of these encounters. Planets is the odd one out. This is more in line with Encounter 1 and 2. You're going to finish your buffs. Generally how I'll do it, I'm curious how he's going to explain Refuge. How I run Refuge at this point in time is I will have the Add Clear start on the opposite side. So if they're Add Clear left, I have them start on right on Darkness. If they are Add Clear Dark, they start on light with the runner. The runner will hit it. They will go to their ones. And the Add Clear will go all the way across the arena to the opposite one, right? So if Dark Runner hits Dark 1, light Add Clear will be on Dark side, getting that buff. Run over to light 1, set the Refuge, and proceed to Add Clear. If you have a high enough resilience, you got your resilience mods on. I don't necessarily see how that's not going to be an issue. That being said, this could cause issues in something like -20, like in a challenge run or a day 1 situation. That being said as well, I do want to stress that many people said day 1 was too easy. Not kind of like Crota's day 1 was way too easy, right? They said that this was abysmally easy, so I will be taking the community at face value for that statement, for that stance, and say that even in a contest mode setting, right, in a challenge setting, that, you know, that tech would not have been impossible, although I think that is an evolution, in all fairness, to how Refuge is set. Normally how you do it is you'll have somebody that'll peel off of Add Clear, and they'll hit the... No, sorry, it's your runners that do it. Your runners will only get so far, and then the gaze person, right, I'm usually gaze, gaze will call out if he's going to try to wipe us with light or dark. You will grab your... say you're wiping us with light, right? You'll grab your dark buff, you'll charge your light Refuge. Or if he's going to wipe us with dark, the light runner will stop, grab their light buff, go to the last dark one made. Generally, you stop about in the middle here, and then you will set that Refuge. So there's not necessarily a wrong way to do Refuge. I think that that's one of those things that is very subjective depending on the group, especially a static. Statics will do it very differently than the rest of the game does. I understand what he's doing here with this. I do. I don't think that this is necessarily the best teaching tool, though, because while you're going R1 plate, R2 plate, R3 plate, right, et cetera, right, it's not necessarily correct, because you could be going from R1 to R2 or R1 directly to R3, and then you got to get the buff and go back to R2. So he's numbering the plates rather than potential outcomes where it could be. As long as you understand that, the chart is fine. I understand it. To your average group, however, you're going to have to explain it can be variable.
These L1, R1 callouts, by the way, it's more of a visual tool for me to explain to you that there are 6 little DNA plates on the left side of the room and 6 more on the right. The mechanics you learned from the first 2 encounters and the first jumping puzzle will all come into play here. Divide yourself up into 3 teams of 2. 2 runners, 2 players on Add Clear, and 2 players on Nezarec. Runners, your job is very straightforward. One of you on the left and one of you on the right. Just like encounters shoulders 1 and 2, you will stand on the glowing plate and shoot it to acquire either the light or dark buff. You will then look for the small black orb you will need to relay your power to. Run over to it, shoot the small black orb, then rinse and repeat. Go back and reacquire your buff, find the next small black orb you need to activate, and so on and so forth. You'll need to move quick though, and remember, 6 plates in total, so make like Sonic and gotta go fast. Ad clear, your job is also very straightforward. Kill all of the Cabal as they spawn in, 1 ad clear person on the left and 1 on the right. There will also be a fair amount of ads spawning near the middle, try to both work on that if you can. The 2 Nezarec players, y'all have a fun job. You see, while Nezarec is hanging out in the back of the room, he will occasionally pick a random...
What do you mean 2 players? There's 1 gaze person. At the very least, it's efficient, right? I guess maybe he's mentioning those in mid. But why would you ever swap? I want Devil's Advocate. Okay, that's probably a static thing. They know each other well enough. They played with each other enough that they have middle. And if, say, the gaze in the back is getting, hit by the purple, right? He's getting, sent to the ceiling. Maybe the second person can take over, but generally when it's gaze, it is your job to 1 pop his shoulders. Succession works very well for that. Unironically, like Outbreak Perfected somehow works for doing that. Graviton Lance, like somehow pulses actually do a really good job of that. I think it's the sheer number of hits tied to the damage output they actually do. His shoulder also can bug out. Generally how you do it is you will pop a single shoulder. Then you will wait for him to, you will see his animation. His model will actually shift into an animation where he'll like look around, right? Like you can actually see him, especially when you go to like phase 2 after first damage phase, you will see him like look around and then he'll stop and he'll bring his like arm back and then he'll raise his arm, that kind of thing. As soon as he really stops, his chest doesn't show that it's glowing, but you can still hit it. There's still a hitbox there. When his chest starts glowing, if you want to just be safe, you're like, oh, visual cue, right? You're hitting his chest to take gaze, and then after you have gaze, when he's jumping down, then you will hit. I actually leave this right shoulder as well. I leave that because I think it's the easiest to hit. When he, then you do that, and once you hit that second shoulder, it will show the burst. It doesn't always glitch if you hit both shoulders first, but it can glitch, is why I do it that way. It's kind of like not doing crisscross right in second encounter. Yes, doing crisscross can technically save more time. Yes, absolutely, popping both shoulders could save time. However, they can glitch and have been known to glitch, much like his damage phase can glitch, where the beam doesn't come down, the music just starts, and he's just, kind of just chilling there. So you lack that cue for that. This can be a very buggy fight, and so I take every advantage that I can to communicate with my team.
Player to hate on. If Nezarec hates you, which you will see as a debuff on the HUD, he will essentially choice target and bully you and pop you up into the air repeatedly. As you can imagine, you don't want Nezarec hating on your runners because they need to be moving fast, not getting popped up into the air. Therefore, the 2 Guardians focusing Nezarec. As soon as he starts hating anybody on your team, y'all need to start shooting and harassing him back. Shoot Nezarec's crit spot and divert his hatred onto you.
So you see, where he's looking around, right?
Him back. Shoot Nezarec.
So when he starts doing this, he'll cast his arm up.
Crit spot and
that means that he has gaze on somebody, and you need to pop his chest like that second.
Divert his hatred onto you. You're intentionally tanking his aggro so the runners can be left alone to do their job in peace. At that point, Nezarec will leap off of his platform and begin chasing you around. 2 Nezarec players keep his attention and also shoot and break his crit spots, 1 on each shoulder and 1 on his chest/tummy. You'll need to shoot and break these because
I think that's a preference thing. Middle ad clear can be going left and right to help with ad clear. I know, especially in my runs that I do, but I also run classic and not day 1. Once again, why am I playing Devil's Advocate? The community said it was way too easy anyways, and people don't even play the game said that it was too easy. It's not wrong to have 2 players on Nezarec. It's definitely not. If that's how your group, your static, your LFG runs it, that's completely fine. Generally, you do help out your ad clear, make sure middle is clear, because if you're getting hit, you can't get your shots off on Nezarec, and then you will start moving left and right, making sure that you have ample ad clear as well. If you are gaze, you are gaze. I have always chosen gaze. The first point was like, I was in a group and people were just like, an LFG actually, and people were like, I don't want to run gaze. I'm like, I'll run gaze. What am I doing? Oh, this is fun. I literally get to play like an MMO tank for a little bit. Nezarec just keeps bouncing on me.
doing so will delay his wipe mechanic. If Nezarec glows to white and leaps up into the air, your whole team will die. Again, shooting and breaking his crit spots will delay that, which the 2 Nezarec players should be doing. So you got the Nez players breaking the crit spots and delaying the wipe mechanic. You got the ad.
I've also always just hit broken both of his crit spots. I didn't actually know that was tied to the phase. But that's an example of good practice and good practice, good etiquette makes it so you don't actually learn things like that. So I did learn something from this video. So if you leave one shoulder open, it will be a shorter phase until he wipes.
Clear players slaying out, and the runners are running. When the runners have finished running, it is DPS time. There's no particular location where you need to meet up and damage Nezarec. He's kind of like Rulk in the Vow of the Disciple raid. He'll run around following you no matter what, but we did find that perching up on plate L3 on our diagram was kind of the way to go.
He is nothing like Rulk. What? In what capacity is he like Rulk? Rulk is a very different fight. You have your technically 3 lanes, right? Your splitter hits first. Your dunkers will hit... Oh, God, now I have to remember. Split hits first. Dunk hits, like, what? Left 1, split 2, and then your initial splitter, I think, split 3s. Oh, it's so weird. I can't remember. It's one of those that I have to actually be in it and actually, like, run the motions to actually remember it. But... like, Rulk kind of just teleports either in left, middle, or right to beam you, so you get your emanating, you know. He does that. I guess during damage, but yes and no? Oh, I know what it is. I know why. I know why that is. Because we dog bull Rulk. Because we drop the well, and for some reason, he likes to stick inside of the well. He can't kick the well, fair warning, but that's why. Because generally we've dogbulled him, we've dropped that well on him, and he sticks inside that well, allowing our div user and our Kata users to actually just go ham. That's why. No, he actually is right in this one. Thank you, chat. He's actually not wrong in that. It's such a weird analogy, though.
Sometimes he would boop 1 or 2 of us off the map, but for the most part, you can kinda knock him around over there without him annoying you too much. But damage him wherever you want. On contest mode, I will recommend plate L3 again, but after contest mode is over,
L5
I can
was
only
fine.
imagine that swords in a radiant well on the ground floor anywhere will ruin this stack.
I've never ran swords on him. I'm down to try it. I'm down to bring, like, Lament. I'm technically, you could actually probably proc... what is it? Bequest Surrounded, right? The DSC sword that everyone uses for Crota if they don't want to use Lament. I'd be willing to... We also have Falling Guillotine back, too, with Origin perk. I'd be willing to try it. I've never seen a group do that. I'd probably use, what, Tractor, maybe, right? Or Tether. I've never seen swords. I have never seen any group use swords. We can get a consistent 2-phase with Thunderlord Surrounder, won't work. So if you leave ads alive, it can, especially if you use well, right? You could proc it. It's like a people leave thralls to Cabal, then don't kill all the Cabal. The Cabal don't disappear because it's damage phase. So that's interesting to think about. I might have to go and do a run where we try that. Actually, that's not a bad idea too, because he does suppress you. If you have a super like, not Gathering Storm, if you have a super, like a roaming super, like say Strand Titan or Stasis Titan actually as well, or any other roaming super, he will knock you out of that roaming super, which is actually going to be something to consider because the Warlocks are getting that super stim for Solar and Final Shape. That can see play, but he will suppress and knock you out of your super, and you will lose that super. Chaos Reach for Warlocks as well can be kind of hit or miss. You kind of have to stay in the back line, because if you get knocked, you will just lose damage. Thunderlord, pretty easy 2-phase. Rockets, I've done 1-phase, but it's very team dependent. General will go L6, the flower on the back, but that also carries a risk of him knocking you off or falling off. I have yet to find a really consistent way to do that. But, I mean, I encourage you down below. What DPS strats have worked for you? Have you tried swords? Did swords work or not? Like, I've never thought swords would actually work on him.
as much damage as you can, probably in a Radiant Well, until you can't damage him anymore, and you go back to square one,
Sword Well,
and repeat.
Wither Horde, Taken Spec.
Remember the jumping puzzle mechanic from earlier where you could tank the big orange wave of death? You can do that in this boss fight if you're having trouble. After shooting and breaking Nezarec's last shoulder, look at the color of the damage burst emitted from that shoulder.
So he would try to wipe you with light, therefore you must set light refuge. You would take a dark buff over to light, set that refuge. This is kind of the standard. If you're running Root of Nightmares, generally your runners will not be fast enough, especially in LFG. Why Taken Spec? Good question, because I actually didn't know this until literally like 2 days ago, and I was running Pantheon week 1 again. So, did you know that Wither Horde, when it hits an opponent, like when you hit it and actually sticks to it, I guess it turns them Taken? So, when we were running Caretaker in Pantheon week 1, we ran Wither Horde, and I swapped my Apex from boss spec to Taken spec, because for the duration of that, he is Taken. As long as your Wither Horde user keeps that debuff up on him, and he counts as Taken, it's like, what, 7% compared to like 5%? Like, it's nutty, honestly.
If it is light, that means whoever is the dark runner should get a dark charge, run over to a nearby light charge, and shoot it for the power. Everyone who gets that buff will be auto-protected from Nezarec's wipe mechanic. And same thing the other way. If you shoot it and break it and it's dark, that means that whoever is the light runner should get a light charge, run over to a nearby dark charge,
yeah,
and
so they're
shoot
using
it.
the runner
now,
strat.
Technically,
they're using runner strat. I feel this puts unnecessary pressure on the runners. That's why I do it what I do. I will have them start add clear opposite sides, like I explained earlier. I feel this puts unnecessary pressure on the runner unless they're okay with it.
Don't need to do this. A lot of teams on day one straight up beat the race by just moving quickly. They never needed to do it, not even one time.
Yeah,
my team did it on contest mode every time after the first DPS wave because we found it to be helpful, but you do you. If you want to see our first full clear on Nezarec, again, link in the pinned comment from the day one raid. Apologies from me, by the way, if I sound frustrated or tired in those clips. Day one raids often make you tired and cranky. Anyway, good luck, get that contest mode clear. Thank you very much for watching.
So, I liked it. I feel like I've been critical of this, but I actually did like it. In context, because this is done so soon after a day one, this makes sense. Like, I understand it. We have tech that we didn't back then. We have weapons that we didn't back then, right? I understand it. It's very interesting to actually go back and see how the game has evolved, how the raid has evolved. And honestly, I feel you couldn't have a much worse video. I do think that there are glaring omissions, right? Such as not explaining the anti-barrier and the Tormentor spawn properly, how they can flip-flop on either side. I do think Ascent block by Interlopers, I think not having that is a kind of a miss on that one. Going into something like planets was explained pretty well. I didn't necessarily agree with that chart. I would never explain the chart that way to somebody, but I understood the actual logic behind it. And for Nezarec, I mean, this gets you there. This gets you pretty much there. He did show in the video hitting the nut, but did not explain the nut. That is also kind of an L. But don't mistake that for me thinking this is a bad video. Don't mistake that for me trying to, like, be mean, trying to, like, be uber critical, right? Especially so soon after day one, dude's tired. I did Crota LFG day one. It was awful. I had to use Wish Ender to one-shot thralls consistently. It was a time. I only got to Bridge. We almost cleared Bridge, but I'm just like, I can't spend, the next 48 hours in contest mode. Which, you do you. If there's going to be someone that's going to go, well, Kip, you don't have Godslayer. You might have all these clears. You seem like you know what you're doing, but, you don't have Godslayer or you don't have the raid title. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion. I mean, yeah, if I'm choosing not to get Godslayer, I do kind of, I lose that right to say some things, I guess. And if that's the way the community is, that's the way the community is. So, but thank you, Fallout Plays, for a good guide. Could use a little bit of fine-tuning if you want to do a modern release of that. Cool. But, I mean, ultimately, it's also past the time of it being relevant. So, interesting to look back on. Hopefully you learned something, or hopefully you have something to share. Let me know what your thoughts are on Nezarec for DPS phase. Let me know what your thoughts are on swords. Let me know rockets. What are your strats? What are you most excited for to try in Final Shape? Going back to Root of Nightmares, do you also teach Root of Nightmares? What are some of the things that you do? Do you think that me calling it 1 middle, 2 wall, 3 top, 4 middle, 5 wall, 6 top, do you think that that's relevant and a good way to call that out? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.